Have you ever considered that the loudest voices in the room often lack the substance needed to create real, lasting change? In today's world, where everything must be seen, heard, and shared, there's a silent power that's often overlooked. We've all been told to speak up, to broadcast our progress, to make sure people know what we're doing. It's almost as if the validation of others is the true marker of success. But what if that's the wrong approach? Imagine making the most significant changes in your life without ever uttering a word about it. Picture moving with such intention that your actions speak louder than any boastful statement could ever do. What if true strength and progress come not from constant chatter, but from quiet, steady determination? This isn't about being mute or hiding away in silence forever. It's about choosing the right moments to speak and letting your actions prove everything you stand for. When you decide to focus on real progress, something shifts inside you. The loud voices around you may continue to shout, but your silence will tell a different story. Consider how people perceive you when you stop seeking constant validation. When you let go of the need to explain yourself to everyone around you, they'll start to notice your transformation, not because you told them, but because your silence speaks volumes about the changes you've made. Your actions, not your words, will do the talking. It's the essence of Stoic philosophy. We don't need to announce every step we take. We don't need to share every win or failure. We simply need to show up with purpose and quiet strength, letting our journey be the message. When you embrace the power of silence, you create space for deeper reflection. Instead of seeking applause, you're focused on internal growth. The results speak for themselves, and that's when true transformation begins. Your silence doesn't mean passivity. It's a strategic decision to focus on the journey, not the applause. It's choosing a path of integrity over noise, discipline over ego, and progress over performance. Silence doesn't just protect your energy, it amplifies your impact. So, how will you approach your next big change? Will you shout it from the rooftops, or will you let your silence prove everything? They say real change is loud, but what if the quiet kind lasts longer? When you start changing inwardly, shifting your mindset, building boundaries, choosing peace over conflict, the world doesn't immediately applaud. In fact, most won't even notice at first. And that's your advantage. You're not here to put on a show. You're not transforming for validation or applause. The change happening within you is deeper than any announcement could ever capture. They might say, "You've changed," and they'll mean it like it's a bad thing, but you don't owe them comfort. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that keeps them unchallenged. Let them be uncomfortable. You've outgrown the version of you that used to explain, justify, and over-explain. Now silence is your reply. That's what makes people uncomfortable, Not your growth, but your refusal to decorate it with words they can pick apart. They can't understand your silence, so they try to fill it with assumptions. Let them. Your silence becomes a mirror, and in that mirror they're forced to see how much they relied on the old version of you, the agreeable, soft-spoken, always available version. But that person isn't here anymore. You've upgraded, not loudly, not dramatically, but with calm, unwavering resolve. That's the power they didn't expect, and it shakes them, because what they can't hear, they can't control. What they can't define, they can't label. You've slipped through the grasp of their comfort zone, and in doing so, you've taken back the narrative. Silence doesn't mean absence. It means presence with intention. It's not weakness. It's strength in disguise. And in this world of noise, your stillness is your edge. You don't need to announce that you've changed. You don't even need to prove it, because the people who once misunderstood your silence will now start fearing it. And that's how you reclaim power, not through noise, but through clarity. See, when you were always available, always justifying, always seeking understanding, they thought they had you figured out. You were readable, predictable, within reach. But now, you've become a question they can't answer, a silence they can't interpret, a presence they can't shake. That's why silence works. It gives you the space to move without being tracked, to grow without being doubted, to lead without explaining. You don't need to convince them you're different. Your new energy already did that. The ones who lost access to you will notice first. They'll try to provoke a response, push for a reaction, test if you're really changed. Stay calm, stay distant, stay unreadable. They'll try to bait you with the past, but you've already made peace with it. They'll try to remind you who you were, but you've already become someone else. The more you explain, the more they pull you back into the story you've already outgrown. That's why silence is your protection. That's why stillness is your revolution, because in silence you're no longer part of their script. You're writing your own. If silence ever saved you, hit subscribe and stay with us. Your peace deserves it. Silence doesn't need to raise its voice to be heard. It echoes in the mind of those who once ignored you. It lingers, sharp, undeniable, unsettling. And that's why it's powerful. You're not explaining yourself anymore, not shrinking to be digestible, not adjusting your truth to fit their comfort. Your silence is not the absence of thought, it's the presence of self-worth. When someone realizes they no longer have access to the version of you that used to beg for understanding, it hits differently. They're not angry because you changed. They're unsettled because they can't read you anymore. You are no longer a mirror for their projections. They can't manipulate what they can't access. And now their only option is to guess, to wonder, to doubt. And that wondering, that's the real punishment. Because while they're stuck in mental loops, replaying old memories, rewriting what they thought they knew, you're writing a new chapter they can't be part of. Growth doesn't ask for permission. It happens quietly, steadily, and unapologetically. There's a storm behind your stillness now, not a storm of chaos, but of clarity, a clean break from your old self and everything that enabled your silence to be taken for weakness. You've stopped defending your change because you know change that is real doesn't need defense. It proves itself in how you carry yourself, in how unavailable you are to the past, and in how little you need to say to be deeply understood, because now you speak less, but your silence says everything. You no longer feel the need to be loud to be seen. Your presence doesn't seek validation. It demands respect without asking. Silence became your signature, your shield, your quiet rebellion against chaos. Once you tried to fix, to explain, to prove. You thought if they just understood you, things would change. But they didn't want understanding. They wanted control. And now, you've taken it back without even raising your voice. They expected breakdowns, dramatic exits, or desperate messages. Instead, they got a blank space where your reactions used to be. You didn't fall apart. You fell silent. And that silence is louder than any goodbye. You stopped showing up where you weren't seen. You stopped replying to people who only listen to respond, not to understand. You stopped explaining your worth to those who made you feel like you had none. That's power. You didn't just walk away. You rose in a direction they couldn't follow. You chose peace over permission, distance over drama, growth over noise. Now you move differently. You don't chase closure. You don't replay old conversations. You don't fill the silence with justifications, because now silence is the full sentence. And those who still watch from a distance, they don't need to hear your explanation. They feel your shift. They sense the elevation. They're left wondering, how did you become so untouchable? You didn't announce your growth. You embodied it. And that version of you, the one who keeps rising silently, that's the one they never saw coming. They look at your silence and think you've given up. But what if the truth is, your silence is the final move they never saw coming? They try to guess what you're thinking. They panic in the quiet. They create stories in their minds to explain why you stopped explaining. And that's when they lose control. Not because you fought back, but because you didn't. Growth doesn't scream. Power doesn't beg. Silence doesn't ask for permission. They expected you to speak, to plead, to convince, but instead you vanished into your evolution. They assumed silence was weakness, but silence is how you rebuild on your own terms. Most people fear not knowing. So when you stop feeding them explanations, they feel lost. And in that confusion, you find clarity. Let them assume you've quit. Let them believe they've won. Because when the dust settles, they'll realize the one who walks away quietly is always the one in control. The game ends when you no longer show up to play, and no goodbye is louder than silence. So here's a question that might haunt you. What if the version of you they thought they broke was just the cocoon? If you're ready to evolve without warning, hit subscribe. The next move is yours.